Welcome, everyone, to another podcast. I really appreciate you being here, watching every one of these episodes. Today, we have Matt Sellick. He's widely recognized as the MVP guitarist in Jesse Cook's ensemble, a role that demands both flawless technique and profound musical intuition. It is within this crucible of precision and passion that Selleck has distinguished himself, quietly amassing a reputation as one of Canada's most gifted and versatile guitarists. His journey, however, extends far beyond the stage with Cook. He was born in Thunder Bay, and he forged in the flamenco heartlands of Spain. Selleck has spent over a decade meticulously crafting a unique sonic identity where the intimate fire of flamenco engages in a powerful dialogue with expansive grandeur of the symphony. This decade-long project is now culminated in his 2025 album, Watching the Sky, which we all love, a defining statement that marks a bold new chapter. This album represents a return to his musical roots in Thunder Bay, which is like over, but I think it's about 10 hours from here, I think, from Toronto. I'm not sure.
Oh, a little more, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So 8 hours to Sault Ste. Marie and another 2 hours to, no, wait, sorry, hold on. That's right. Now, so the album represents a return to his musical roots in Thunder Bay, where he first performed with the symphony and a step forward into a new sound world. With the release and ongoing tours, both as a soloist with Orchestra and with Jesse Cook's acclaimed ensemble, Selleck is poised for wider recognition as not only a master interpreter of flamenco, but as composer with a distinctive and compelling orchestral voice. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on here. Thank you.
It's really nice to meet you. Really appreciate that.
Likewise.
Can you take us back? When was the defining moment when you got into music and that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so it's funny. I remember the moment where I knew I wanted to play guitar, or where I wanted to learn to play specifically flamenco guitar, even though at the time I didn't know that that's what it was. But getting into music just like more broadly, I actually don't remember. It's always been part of my life. My mom was a concert violinist, so like when I was a baby, I remember there was always CBC playing in my house, and like every Saturday morning, and it was very eclectic musical upbringing, right? So there's a lot of this sort of like I don't remember the very first thing, but I've always been a huge fan of like Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler, and like Simon and Garfunkel and Bob Dylan and anything classical, and like it's but then my first instrument was actually classical flute. I picked up classical flute when I was 6 or 7 because my older sister played it and I thought it was cool. So yeah, it's been like a sort of like broader part of my life for as long as I can remember. But yeah, the inciting incident for guitar specifically was like age 7, hearing Jesse Cook's music for the first time. I think it was Vertigo, his like 3rd album, and going like, what is this? How do I do this? Can someone teach me how to do this? And yeah, that was the start of it.
So your role in Jesse Cook's band is described as requiring a balance of virtuosity with emotional immediacy. How do you consciously work to maintain that balance during a performance? And how did you end up meeting Jesse Cook?
Oh yeah. So it does require a very specific balance of skills, and it was skills that when I first joined the band, I actually don't think I had all of the skills, because there's a lot of stuff beyond. Like I'd played in bands before, but mostly because it's so niche what I do, it's usually like you sub in to another group that's been around for a while, and you sort of hop in, and you're a temporary member or something, and it's hard to jump in, or it's hard to decide one day that you're going to make a group and suddenly there's a bunch of people who are wanting to do that exact thing, right? So so I found that when I joined the band, it needed like the sort of thought process that I wasn't used to doing, like how you integrate this kind of guitar into this kind of ensemble, because flamenco guitar traditionally is very it is designed as an accompaniment instrument. You accompany singers and dancers, and the guitar is very bright and dry sounding, and it has a relatively low register. So you kind of have to work with that. And as soon as you hop into an ensemble that has like a drum set or a bass guitar and another flamenco guitar, you're sort of competing for sonic space. So you have to think about how do I do my job, but also not overdo it. It was very like on the fly kind of learning experience. It was really, really fun. And you sort of very quickly learn what you have to, the ways in which you have to adapt to work in this kind of anytime there's an ensemble where the instruments that you're bringing to it are not traditionally used in that way, you have to adapt, right? So now as for how I actually met Jesse, this also I remember very specifically. I want to say this would have been like 2009-ish. I used to play at a farmer's market in Thunder Bay. And just your sort of run-of-the-mill Saturday morning, local farmers market. It's inside our old exhibition building, and I used to go there and I used to busk on Saturday mornings. And I remember doing this with a friend of mine, and we used to play some of Jesse's songs right when I was learning to do them, and I was probably 16 at the time. And one day my mom brought one of those very early digital cameras that shoots like 360, like 360, like the resolution. And so this very like low res recording. And she just filmed us doing a couple songs at the market. The video is terrible. I still have them. I think they're still on YouTube. And I uploaded them to YouTube, and then I found the contact form on Jesse's website, which I think went to his manager. And what ended up happening was I just said like, "Hi, I'm this guy from Thunder Bay, and I know you tour here every few years." Like, and at that point I'd seen him in concert maybe 2 or 3 times, because he would come through. As Thunder Bay is the only, like, it's not like the only main city, but it is. I'm probably not going to get this quite right. You might want to fact check me on this, but it's like the largest city like between Sault Ste. Marie and Winnipeg. It is the only reasonably sized city, right? It's only 100,000 people, but it's it's 8 hours between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, and then another 8 hours to Winnipeg. So basically, when you're touring, you need to go through Thunder Bay. If you're on a bus or you're driving, or to get from Toronto out west, you have to go through it. So you may as well do a show. And so Jesse did shows there like regularly for a number of years. And I remember just thinking on a whim, what would happen if I emailed his manager? And so I just said, "Hi, I'm this guy from Thunder Bay. Next time he comes to town," which was going to be the year after, I would just love a chance to meet him and just say hi. I don't know if he does that, or if that's something that anyone does these days. And he wrote back, like his manager forwarded it to him. Then he wrote back to me directly, like 2 days later, saying basically like, "Hey, this is pretty great that you play my stuff. I'd love to meet you. Do you want to play a song on stage when we come to Thunder Bay?" And 16, 17-year-old me is like freaking out right now, because this is the guy that when I was a kid I wanted to play like, right? So it was a very like, I got to meet my childhood guitar hero and play a song with him. And just sort of overnight, I after actually meeting him, he gave me some names of, "Hey, if you like my music, Jesse's music, if you like what I do, it's not traditional flamenco, but clearly you like traditional flamenco. So like, here's a bunch of names, and here's a bunch of albums you should listen to." And Nicholas Hernandez, his second guitarist at the time, also was like writing out exercises for techniques for me on the back of the comp request forms that they had in the backstage. and I still have them. I keep them in my guitar case, and I still play them. And it's so
Wow.
it was this very like overnight. I was like, this is what I'm doing with my life now. This is I have a direction. I have a goal, some vague idea of what I want to do, but I just love this, and this is my life now. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Your story of how you met Jesse Cook. That's amazing, my friend. So what do you think was the most transformative lesson or realization you had while studying with master guitarists in Madrid and Granada?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's good. It's a good question. So yeah, in Granada, I used to go to this there's just a flamenco school in Granada, and Granada is honestly, I think, one of my favorite cities on the planet. It's absolutely beautiful, and I used to think that like I would just, not that I ever wanted to permanently move there, but I thought I could live here. I could see myself living in this city forever and then just disappearing from everything else. And but yeah, it's uh, there. One of the major lessons that you learn there is that, these schools have a guitar component, and they have a dancing component, and they have a singing component. Traditional flamenco is, you always have a guitarist and a singer and a dancer, maybe a percussionist, but there's these three main focal points, these three sides to the art, and you have to learn to some degree how all of them work. Because if you're a guitarist, you have to kind of know how the singers think. You have to know how the dancers think. Helps if you can actually do it a little bit. And they have classes specifically about the rhythms, because the rhythms in flamenco are very, to North Americans, you could probably say they're a bit peculiar. Like
Wow.
there's a lot of rhythms that are in 12 that have accents that aren't in places that you would expect if your life is mostly in like Western music, and it takes a while to sort of get your head around them. But that's not the only reason you need these classes. You need these classes because the rhythm is just such a focal point of the art. It is what it is all based around. There's tons of rules you can break. There's tons of rules that you're allowed to mess around with, except the meter. You're not allowed to change the meter. It's like, if you do that, it's not, then it's not the form, and it's not flamenco anymore. That's one of the absolutely most crucial things. So they have entire classes that are just based around like, not the guitar, not the singing, not the dancing. It's just the concept of how the rhythm works. And to sort of live in that and think in that is very important. So often, like when I teach now, you have students who, and like I remember being like this too, where you have a very specific goal for what you want to do with the technique and how you want to sound, and you have to sort of step back and say like, okay, in order to do that, you need this sort of fundamental, this thing that from which everything else in flamenco is built, or on top of which everything else in flamenco is built, and what you need to have there in order for it to make sense musically. And it just kind of gives you a framework for how to think about the music. And that was a huge part of it. And in Madrid, most of what I did was more about solo guitar. I wanted to be very, like, I wanted to specifically focus on solo guitar as a, independent from the singing and dancing. I wanted to learn all about the specific forms. I wanted to learn how to, get a certain technical level. But ironically, the more I did that, the more I thought, okay, but I do want to know how the singers and dance, like I want to have the full picture. I want to be a really, really good solo guitarist who understands everything that there is that goes on. And what you end up realizing is that it is absolutely a lifelong thing. I know flamenco artists who are in their 70s or 80s, and they still go, I don't know everything. I'll never know everything. You wake up every day and you learn something new. It's you can never know everything it is to know about this art form. And there's something very comforting about that in a way, when you think about how much more, like how much more you have to learn, how much there is that you don't know. It is very comforting to run into someone who's in their 80s who goes, oh yeah, no, you're never not going to feel like that. So just enjoy where you are now, and like always be working forwards, or always be looking forwards and working towards the next thing. But don't beat yourself up for not knowing all of it, because you're never going to know all of it. So
It's
yeah,
true because I heard even the famous drummers, even Neil Peart took lessons.
yeah, of
Charlie
course,
Rich took lessons.
yeah,
Um, and the famous violinists, they still get lessons because they may not know everything, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And it tells you, you know, it gives you a window into how other musicians think. And there's lots, like I have I think a very specific way of thinking about what I do, as I think most musicians do. And to get someone else's perspective, even if it's not how you view it you often find like, oh, I hadn't thought of that way, or I thought about it that way, and suddenly I have a, you know, some new things to consider. And then it leads you to, you know, write something or try something out that you wouldn't have before, and that's part of the joy of it.
Yeah, the phrase drink from the fountain is central to your single. Now, beyond
Hmm.
technical skill, what is the most essential thing you drank in from the source in Spain?
Oh, so I would say, yeah, it's funny that, because that one I wrote that one after being in Granada, and I think there was part of it that, I don't know if this sounds kind of cliche, but
Mm.
when you go to Spain for the first time and you're like, oh, suddenly everything I've been listening to makes sense. Like there's a vibe. I've recently realized I've become the kind of person who says that something has a vibe, and I and I didn't used to, but I was like, yeah, there's a feeling to this place. There's a like an approach to the music that is unlike how we think about Western music. Because I had a classical background. I studied classical music since I was 7 years old, and had a
Wow.
very sort of specific way of thinking. Like I was, and also concurrently just starting an undergrad in classical music, and you know, immediately also going to Spain to study flamenco and trying to sort of reconcile these two approaches in my head. And at first it was very confusing because you'd have these sort of different musical priorities and different things that each one values more than the other. And after a while you just sort of it's just sort of, it's not that it suddenly made sense, but it was that you kind of get this like, oh, there are lots of different ways to look at this, and you sort of get this idea about, you know, if I'm trying to explain, and this is sort of helpful for the like the orchestral arranging, is there's different ways of thinking about how music works, different priorities, different you know, different things that you focus on in each genre, and different tropes, different cliches that these different styles do. And it helps to be able to explain one in the language of the other, so that the people in the other, you know, musical language understand it. And that goes both ways, because there are lots of things in classical music that if you try to explain it to people who've lived their whole lives in flamenco, don't really make sense. And it completely goes the other way too, where you'll try to explain a flamenco concept uh, to a classical musician, and like, you know, I too, with my classical background, would go, I don't, that doesn't make sense in my musical framework. So it was hugely beneficial to go and just understand how that language works, how the people who live and have grown up in that style, how they think about that genre, and to try to adopt that into how I think about it too. Um, and then, yeah, you end up with two ways of approaching everything. But it's, again, that's what makes it fun. That's what, you know, you sit down to compose and you go, how do I want to think about it today? How do I want to approach my music today? It's, yeah.
It's not just, you know, how do I approach my music today? It's how much of Matt is in your music and how
Mm-hmm.
much of music can describe Matt. Like if someone said, how do you describe Matt Sellick? Oh, flamenco, passionate, you know, music moves him. So when you're orchestrating your guitar works for a full symphony, that's
Mm-hmm.
a monumental task. Now, what was the greatest challenge in translating the intricate rhythmic language of flamenco into the language of a symphony orchestra?
uh, it is a challenge. So I think the biggest challenge, and this kind of goes for anyone who tries to do a guitar with orchestra thing, that I don't think this would be specifically for flamenco, but are you familiar with the like the Rodrigo concerto, the Concerto de Aranjuez? which I have a terrible time pronouncing. It's like the famous classical guitar concerto.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at the score for it because I wanted to do a lot of score study to sort of figure out how to make this combination work. What are, the trends? What are the things that the orchestration techniques that tend to be used in order to make this combination work? And then I was looking at it and going, oh yes, whenever the orchestra is playing at the same time as the guitar, the orchestra is playing triple piano, like as quietly as possible. And there's nothing in the guitar register unless it's doubling, and there's not it has to be very sparse. But also for the Rodrigo concerto, there's it was written at a time where there was no, you wouldn't amplify a guitar to play with the orchestra. You would be playing acoustically. And we have, these days I think it still tends to be performed that way. The performances I've seen have been unamplified for the guitar. But when I play, I have no I have no delusions that I need to do it without a microphone. I playing flamenco guitar, the norm is to do it with a microphone. Otherwise, you just in a concert hall, you will not be heard. It does not project well. It is the difference between classical and flamenco guitars. Classical guitars are built to project quite well, I think. But the wood that's used for flamenco guitars is considerably lighter and thinner, so it's punchier, and it's loud, but there's no sustain. So you need an some kind of amplification, unless you're playing in a cafe, like a very, very small, or like in one of those like underground arch tunnel things, where they have tablau shows. But if you're doing something in a concert hall, you need amplification. And so even so, the biggest challenge is, as the composer, as the orchestrator, is writing it in a way where the guitar doesn't get lost, or writing it in a way where they complement each other, which leads to a lot of really interesting sort of like, you'll hit a block with the piece. If the piece already exists and you're trying to rewrite it so that it works with this combination. And this came up with Drink from the Fountain, where there were a bunch of spots where I go, well, this line happens twice. The guitar could play it the first time. The orchestra could play it the second time. I don't want to just have them trade it. I don't just want to do it like where guitar plays by itself and then orchestra plays by itself. But the guitar is a great, like I said, it is an accompaniment instrument. That is traditionally its role. So it's very well suited to that. And likewise, I can find a way to make the orchestra very sparse and light, and but have that contrast within the same piece. And so it's, I don't know if you can tell by the sort of excited way I talk about it, but it is both very challenging and very, very fun. It is like every time you sit down to do this, you go, this is going to be hard, and therefore I'm going to have a great time doing it, because well, a lot of the composing stuff, I don't want it to be easy. It would be great if it was, but I like doing things that are challenging, and that there is not very much of. There's not a whole lot of guitar with orchestra. There is a bit, like Vicente Amigo, one of my favorite flamenco guitarists, has a brilliant sort of orchestral suite called Poeta that I think came out in '97, and I think Leo Brouwer did the orchestration for it, and it's beautiful. It's an amazing piece of music. And like, so there's that, and there's the Rodrigo concerto, and I know there's some other stuff. Like but I think there's nothing that's like really quite as famous as the Rodrigo that gets played super often, like on the radio or in concerts. And I was thinking, like, I kind of want to add to this. It can be done. It's hard. People do it. But I want to take on the challenge of taking these two things. There's the orchestra stuff that's been part of my life since I was a kid. And there's the flamenco guitar that I've been doing since I was 16 or 17. And I want to, these are two sides of the things I love, and I want to smash them together and see if it works. So yeah, that was the sort of motivation to take on that challenge, I guess. Yeah.
Man, I know you're mentioning earlier about if you do this one thing that nobody will hear you, but I was talking to artists and I asked him about acoustics and if acoustics were important to him. And he said that he would walk into a venue and go like this.
Mhm.
and that'll tell them whether there's acoustics or not. When you were playing with Jesse, or when you were playing solo or whatever, um, is that what you were looking for? Is acoustics? Like, would you only play at a venue if the acoustics were good?
No, I like it when they are, but I okay. I mean, for example, if you walk into a room, like I don't do the clap thing, but I will often walk into a room and play on the edge of the stage. You know, if it's a big concert hall, I'll play on the edge of the stage for a second and be like, oh, this is a nice room. In Jesse's show, we do an old Crowded House cover at the end of the set for one of the encores usually, and we do it acoustically. So we usually run it because I'm not a good singer. It's I can sing. I can sing backup for songs competently, but I don't think of myself as being a confident singer. So we always run the song before the show as a like get into the mood of the space, kind of feel it out. And I'll often go, oh yeah, this is a nice room. But I we do so many shows like with Jesse or my solo shows or with other acts that I play with around Toronto, like the I like it when the acoustics are good, but I honestly, some of the most fun places I've ever played, it's not a factor. Like you'll be like the acoustics aren't. You could say the acoustics aren't great, or just the sound in general. Like maybe the sound system is terrible, or you're like it's it's not that it's not a factor, but I've done enough of them to know that it's not the most important thing for making the show fun. For the kind of stuff that we do, a lot of the times it's these like hole in the wall kind of.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of an example, but there's lots of these tiny little shows that I've done where I walk away and I go like that was the most fun I've ever had, and it can be in like a it can be on a tour where you do a theater one day and then like a tiny little club the other like the day after, and the club will be more fun, and it's hard to put a finger on why that is, but yeah. So at the end of the day, yeah, the acoustics are really nice. If like it's good to have, but it doesn't always. It's not always the biggest factor in whether you walk away from the show
Mm-hmm.
having had a great time or not. No.
Yeah, now you have this album, Watching the Sky, which is described as a project in building for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did the initial vision for this album change or evolve with that long gestation period?
So yeah, I think about a decade ago. This would have been shortly after I finished my undergrad, and I it's the really nice thing about going to university in a relatively small town is that all of your profs, most of them anyway, play in the local symphony.
Hmm.
So you get to talk to them every day. You get to you get to know them. You get to know how they play and what they like, um, and it also kind of gives you a bit of a foot in the door. You can sort of get the word around that. Oh yes, I'm writing orchestral stuff, because the way this sort of came to be is that when I was in university, I was taking classical guitar concurrently with trying to get good at flamenco. I was taking classical guitar, and I think at the end of my second year, I just it's not that I grew tired of trying to do both. It was that I actually really struggled to do both. I found that the way in which flamenco is different from classical guitar made it really hard to be really good at one and still do the other.
Mm.
Like in flamenco, there's a way of plucking the strings that's just slightly different enough from how you do it in classical, where if you're trying to get it to be muscle memory, it's really hard to do both of them. It's really like, basically it comes down to this. I'll keep the technical details to a minimum, but it's whether or not you put the string on your nail or whether you put it on the pad and then you pull through and it ricochets off your nail. And just trying to have two different ways of doing that as muscle memory was, for me, it was too much. I can't do both of these at the same time and be able to do one of them really well. So I thought I want to move on from classical guitar, and I still love listening to it, but I don't want to play it. And I remember saying this to my, the chair of the department at the time, who happened to be the composition prof, and he said, "Well, you can. Are you interested in composition? Because I know that you like flamenco guitar, and it had always been in the back of my head that if I wanted to be a good flamenco guitarist, I would have to write my own material, because that's the norm in flamenco. You play your own material. You can play Paco de Lucia stuff, you can play Vicente Amigo stuff, but it is expected that you become your own composer. And I always had that in the back of my head. And so I just, went to the registrar's office and switched to composition. And the next year I was taking composition classes. And so through all that, it was like, oh, suddenly I'm writing for instruments. I don't know how they work, but I'm in this school with all the local orchestral musicians and going to all their shows. And it basically, the short version of this is, out of university, I kind of got a bit of a foot in the door with the local orchestra. They knew I existed, so they offered me a show, saying like, "Hey, is there?" I think the first show I did may have been with another local band that I was subbing into, and then I remember thinking like, could I do one of these if we had the rep for it, like if we had things we could play, could I? And that's kind of how it came to be. Is every couple of years we would do another show, and I would have something new written, and I would just kind of hope that they would be willing to play it, and that went on for 10 years, and then one day you realize, oh, I've got enough stuff for a record. I've got 45, 50 minutes worth of material, and
wow,
maybe I don't even remember if it was my idea to record it. It may have been, so the bass player. The double bass player in the Thunder Bass Symphony is his name is Martin Blanchette, and he's a great bass player. And I feel like it was his idea. I'd like to give him credit for the idea to record it. I kind of feel like after one of the shows, he thought, "Have you thought about recording these?" And I remember thinking, well, it sure occurred to me. I just never thought that it would be the kind of thing that we could practically do. That they would be interested in, and it turns out I was wrong. So yeah, that's the story there.
Do you believe that flamenco is collaborative, supportive art form?
Do I believe that it is?
Yeah,
I would certainly think so. It's
okay. So, how does that philosophy directly influence your collaborations with conductor Evan Mitchell and percussionist Marito Marks on the album?
Oh yeah, so. It's actually, so Evan, who I we talked before the recording. I didn't know him super well, but I was wonderfully, not surprised, but just like, it was wonderful to find out that he was a percussionist, is a percussionist, I think, himself, and he got it, what I wanted. Like, he listened to the original versions of the songs, and he heard what I was talking about, and sort of the challenges I was facing in this. And there were times in recording where he would turn to me and say, "Look, man, I know what you want." I was grateful that this didn't happen too often, but but there were times where he would turn to me and say, I know what it is you're going for. What you've written on the page is good, but I have an idea that'll make it better. Not like we're not changing the composition, but I know the effect you want, and what you've written isn't quite going to get that effect, but here's what will. And so I every time that he made a little tweak to something, sometimes it was like an articulation change, or we'd drop a note here or there, we'd change a register on something. And I remember thinking very early on, oh, he gets it. He almost gets it better than I do. Like, he very, very put a lot of effort into making sure that this was going to sound the way I wanted, even if I didn't know exactly how to get it there. Sometimes it was awesome. And Marito as well. Marito is, I met through Jesse Cook. He's one of the drummers in the band. And I remember, playing with him for a couple of years in Jesse's band, and we joke that he is a clock. Like, he is if you needed a click track, you wouldn't need a click track with him.
Mm.
He's just so consistent, got such a good groove, has such a great intuition for everything. He's so I just like the loveliest person. And he yeah, I remember calling him up and saying, like, do you want to do this project with me? I need someone to be sort of the glue, like you understand my music. We've done he and I've done lots of duo gigs together over the years. And I remember him just sort of jumping on it, being like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So he came up to Thunder Bay. He stayed crashed at my mom's house with me for the week. And yeah, he brought this sort of this intuition about what I like, what I wanted. He brought most of his instruments with him, but he found some stuff in the basement at my mom's house. Like
Wow.
he found a djembe and an old oud that I had since I was like 15, that I'd never actually used. They were just sitting there, and he said, I'm going to bring these to the recording, and I'm going to like just feel some stuff out. So there's one of the tracks on the album. I think it's In the Rain. I gave him partial arranger credit because he improvised stuff that was not even anywhere, like it wasn't even remotely on the score. I think on the score I said, yeah, have fun, like here's some slashes, to do whatever you want. And he shows up with the udu and he's like playing these cool little rhythms on it, and I'm like, dude, this is like exactly like I could hear it in my head, but not really. Like this is what I knew this is what I wanted, but not how to get it, and he's just got it. He's just nailed it without me having to say anything. So yeah, that was the sort of spirit of collaboration. It was very integral to traditional flamenco. I love that I used to be the kind of person who would try to do everything myself. And since I moved to Toronto, I've started to find that, you know, if you work with people for a while, you can really, really trust them to just have this, you know, this intuitive approach to like, I think Matt will like this. I'm going to do this. And I'm so happy that it's worked out like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you moved to Toronto, but Thunder Bay and Lake Superior. So these are cited as inspirations, both Thunder Bay and Lake Superior. How do you translate the feeling of a rugged landscape into a musical composition?
Ooh, so yeah, there was, I think in 2018 or so, I did this project. I called it North Shore, and basically I went on a 7-week camping trip on that shoreline, that sort of 8-hour shoreline between Thunder Bay and Sault Ste. Marie. And I remember trying to figure out that exact question through that project and going like, how do I translate this? What is, because I wanted to, you know, I'd been studying flamenco, but I wanted to do something with it that felt like me, that where I would well, let's put it this way. If someone were to listen to it, they would go, that sounds like Matt Sellick. Like that sounds, because there's, you know, when you go to Spain, this is the other thing about going to Spain as a flamenco guitarist is, or when you're trying to learn it, you go and you go, oh yes, I will never be as good at flamenco guitar as most of the people here. It is, the technical level in Spain is insane. You go and you'll see someone busking on the side of the road, and you go, that person is better at guitar than almost everyone else I've ever met. And that's like, and you just sort of have to accept that if I'm going to do something with flamenco, if I'm going to approach this art form, it has to be something that I have to do it in a way that only I can do. Otherwise, there's no reason for me to do it. You know, so I have to do something that is personal and authentic to who this person is, who loves classical music and flamenco music, and you try to do it in a way that is like authentic to all of your inspirations. So yeah, I remember bringing it to Lake Superior, and just you'd get in that mindset of how, you know, I used to camp there all the time when I was, you know, 5 to 15 years old. And I'd spend my summers just sort of sitting on the beach and building castles and staring at the waves and sitting on the rocks and just daydreaming, just like letting your imagination kind of do whatever it wants. And so going back there, I suddenly remembered how, you know, how that would be when you were a kid. Like what that would feel like, and you get put in this sort of headspace about so being there lets you sort of let go of things and just exist next to the lake. And the lake's great for that. You sort of realize you'll stare at Lake Superior for hours and hours, and then you'll and you won't realize it'll seem like minutes have passed. It's bizarre. And I wrote this song, I think it's The Spell, which is it's one of the orchestrated pieces on the new album. And I remember I wrote that at a park. So it's in Lake Superior Provincial Park. The bay is called Old Woman Bay, and it's a couple hours north of Sault Ste. Marie. And I remember sitting there for probably a few hours, just, what would look to most people, and me, if I was watching myself doing it, it looks like noodling. I'm just noodling for hours and hours and hours. But it almost had this sort of, being next to the water with the waves and just the sound and the clouds and everything, just sort of the pace of that environment. It's almost hypnotic. Like, it's almost like you just kind of get lost in it. And I remember coming away from it with this really neat kind of ostinato pattern, this arpeggiated guitar pattern it's still one of my favorite things that I've ever written. And I sort of took it back to my campsite with me. And over the next couple of days, I worked out a melody for it. But the core of this piece is the sort of oscillating pattern of like superimposed rhythms. And I mean, I'm sure if you were to listen to it, I'm probably reading too much into my own composition, but that's how it felt. Writing it was this very, almost like I just sort of lost myself in it, and made this piece of music that sort of represented that state of mind while in that environment. So that's, I don't know if it's always worked out like that for every piece of music I've written, but that was the one that most closely embodied what I wanted to, with bringing flamenco to that place I grew up and seeing what would happen with it. Yeah.
Yeah. The album seems deeply personal, echoing sleepless nights and formative friendships. Now, is it difficult to be that vulnerable in your compositions, and how do you protect the personal meaning while sharing it with the audience?
Well, the simple answer for that is not really. It's I usually find that, when I do shows, I try to be pretty open with the audience about not like revealing too much, that I like it that people can interpret the music in the way that suits them. I've had people come up after shows and tell me that a piece of music meant something to them that I had never intended. It was completely far removed from what it meant to me. But I thought, why would I want to get in the way with that? It's so on the one hand, I don't want to reveal too much, but only because I like people to form their own interpretations, and not because I don't want to talk about what it means to me. I find I'm fairly open about that sort of like the sort of personality behind the pieces and what emotions or whatever may have gone into it. I'm fine with that. And I'm trying to remember what part 2 of your question was.
Yeah, do you think your experience as a soloist with the Thunder Bay Symphony Orchestra early in your career shaped your confidence and approach to this large-scale project?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, because I knew the orchestra very, not every member, and obviously there's some turnover every year in who the members of the orchestra are, but the ones who had been there for a very long time, I felt quite comfortable with. I knew that, if there was something, I think one of my favorite examples would have been like one of the performances. I wrote something for a specific, maybe I'm this might be paraphrasing, or this might be, I'm slightly misremembering it, but I think I wrote something for bass clarinet, and the clarinet player, the second clarinet player, who would have been playing the bass clarinet part, came up to me before the rehearsal and said, this would be better on an A clarinet. Like this would like not to tell you how to do your own piece of music, but as the person who's about to play this, it'll sound better on a different instrument, which they would still be playing, but they would they're like, there's no reason for this to be on a bass clarinet. And I remember thinking, oh, look, I'm glad you told me. Excuse me while I, go to my laptop and redo the part and re-export it and print it off for you. Here you go. And I just felt very, very comfortable. It was just very, it was super nice to, like to have, to just feel like, oh, if something can be made better, they'll tell me. So you get into this really nice feedback loop of being able to try something out, and if it could be better, or if you've written something that isn't going to sound the way you want it to, they'll probably just tell you, and then you can fix it or make it better. And so I got quite used to that. It was a really, really nice feeling of just, the first time I did it, I was terrified because I'd never done it before. It's a big ensemble. How's it going to sound? I don't know. Can I trust the way I think it's going to sound in my head? Because I mean, at the time when I first started, I was working with like Finale 2004 stock like sampler playback, and you can't judge anything from that. So it's, so yeah, the first time I went into a performance, I had no clue what was going to happen, and that was terrifying. But every time since then, it's only been something to look forward to. It's you get to think, this will be the first time I get to hear this new piece, and that's awesome. And if it turns out that it doesn't sound the way I want it to, they'll help me figure out why. That's, yeah, it's been a really great time.
Yeah. So I know that, do you think that every night with Jesse Cook's band sharpened you, but in what specific tangible way do you feel you are a different guitarist now than before you joined the tour?
Well, I think, and I hope I'm right, but I would like to think that I'm much more, trying to think what the right word for this is. Not cautious, not a more cautious player. Definitely not. No, I feel less compelled to overplay. I think when I joined, I really, really wanted to almost like prove myself, right? You sort of like, and not to the band, obviously. Like the band is all lovely people who, like, we're all very, they're all very, very nice people and just very encouraging and supportive. And so you would never feel the need to prove yourself to any of them, but like to the audience, right? You're on stage in front of anywhere like up to, thousands of people. And it's, and like not all the shows are big like that, but when you're in front of 1,000 people, you kind of go like, oh, do I need to make an impression? And Jesse's a very fiery player, right? And he's got like really big sound, and I remember joining the band and thinking like, how do I didn't used to be a particularly confident player. I liked the way I liked and do like the way I played, and currently play. But you sometimes you feel like, oh, what is my role? Like what is my, other than rhythm guitarist, when you take a solo? If you're going to have that moment in the spotlight, how am I going to approach this? And I used to feel compelled to try to play super fast and try to be super flashy, and because I thought that's what Jesse does. And it's not the only thing he does, but his solos are quite impressive, and they get your attention, and they're super fun, and I thought, like, do I try to match that? And then so the more we did that, like the more we did the tours, the more I realized, no, that's not me. That's never been what I love playing that way, but it's not me. It's not. I like sort of more. I don't know, things that are a bit more like, I don't know how to describe it. If I knew how to describe it, I wouldn't need to write the music in the first place. But but whatever it is I do is different. I think this is the best way I can put it. And I would, maybe I can leave this part slightly up to interpretation, where when I think there are composers, and I think I've heard Jesse say this. Um, I don't want to misquote anyone, but I if not him specifically, I know I've heard other composers say this. They often say like, I want to write music that makes people want to dance,
Mm-hmm.
or that should be, or not should be, but for some composers, that is what they want the impact of the music to be. They want there to be this groove, and they want there to be this this overall effect that just makes people want to get out of their seats and dance. And I realized at some point that all my favorite pieces of music are not like that. I uh, my I'm gonna let's put it this way. I'm trying to think what they all are. I have a few favorite pieces of music, and one of them is the theme from the 1983 movie Local Hero,
Oh,
which is written by Mark Knopfler.
wow.
Yeah. Um, and my other favorite is the Chopin Nocturne in D flat major, and the third one is Nimrod from the Enigma Variations.
Mm.
And these are all very different pieces of music, but they're all pieces of music that make me want to cry. And I suddenly realized, oh, that is because I was asking myself, is the kind of music that I want to sound like? What do I want to write?
Mm.
Which is not always what I want to play. Right? I want to play the fun stuff too. I want to play the Jesse stuff, but that's his style. I love playing his style. But when I write something, I want to write stuff rather than making people want to dance. I want to write stuff that makes people want to cry.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Not all the time,
I
but
love those songs.
that is
I love those.
broadly, yeah, broadly
Do you
speaking,
think? Do
that
you
is
think
it.
Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, that movement one where it goes do do do?
Oh
Do
yeah, yeah,
you think that
sure.
makes you cry?
Like it's definitely in that, like in that vein for sure. Yeah, that kind of stuff where it's like, and I don't mean like it has to like, don't need people openly weeping in the audience, but I was at the TSO concert a couple weeks ago when they did the Elgar Enigma Variations, and I was one of them. There were lots of people in the audience openly weeping.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking, "Wow, I'm glad we're all cool with this. That's great." But it's really quite moving. And you could just hear like, especially when they got to that one movement, because there is that one that is the most famous. What's Nimrod? I think it's number 10 or something.
Yeah, I found that Paloma Faith's "Love Is" what is that one? That one makes me cry. Paloma
Yeah,
Faith.
yeah. I know her. I'm trying to think. I don't know her music super well, but I used to know. She was on a couple of the old like British panel comedy shows, and
Mm.
that was how I discovered her. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is cool. I really like this.
Only love
Um,
can feel like this. That's it.
I
Only
don't think I
love
know that
can
one. Yeah,
feel like this.
but stuff like that where it's
Hmm.
there's definitely a a need for that kind of music, and I in more recent years I've started to feel like that's the sort of thing that's the thing I can do. So in the show with Jesse, there's a sort of solo moment that I have at the beginning of one of the songs.
Mm.
And it's one of his songs, right? But I do a little solo at the beginning of it, and it's probably a minute and a half. And every time I go out, I just think, I'm going to put everything into like not trying to be flashy, but trying to like move people in a way that's very different from uh, like the overall vibe of the show, because that's what I can do. So yeah, that's sort of been the way that I've tried to evolve my playing, and just find a role, find a niche that I can occupy that just feels like me. That's uh, it's been a lot of fun, kind of very rewarding too. So yeah.
Yeah, watching the sky is like you're stepping firmly into the role of a composer. Who are some of the composers? And I think you said that one of them was Rodrigo, I think.
Oh yeah. So
So, like in
yeah,
any genre, who have most influenced your approach to writing for orchestra?
yeah. So yeah, Rodrigo was a big one. Actually, I'm actually looking at my pocket score over on the shelf over there. Is the because I used to reference it for like not for like specifics or anything, but for what kind of voicings would work, or what kind of, if the guitar is playing in this register, what kind of register can I space around it? How much space do I need to give it? Anything else to not step on it? And so Rodrigo, I would say that concerto was influential less from a musical perspective and more from an orchestration perspective, if that makes sense. Like I wanted to know how that ensemble would work with the guitar. And the music itself, I love that concerto, but it's not, I never felt like it was a huge influence on me, other than the second movement, because the second movement is that very, it's the one that's used as the intro to Spain by Chick Corea. And which I think is how a lot of people know it, actually. It's like, do you know the Rodrigo concerto? And they go, no, I have no idea what that is. And you say, it's the intro for Spain.
Chick Corea, he's pretty good.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I know that intro. Yeah, of course I know that. So yeah, but composers, I think my favorite classical composer is probably Chopin. Although I go back and forth on, like, sort of relative rankings of my favorites. I really like Debussy. I really like Strauss. Strauss was great for orchestration as well. I remember always loving the waltzes, and when I started doing the orchestral stuff, I would just pull out my old textbooks and try to find the things that I felt had spoken to me, right? Where you go, oh, this specifically moved me. Why did it do that? What is it about? Because often it's not specifically the melody or the harmony, it is the orchestration. And what instruments you pick. It's like your color palette for how to do that. So like a big part of it is, I think someone had the analogy for like how to approach this, where I used to worry that I wasn't using the full orchestra all the time. I thought, well, if I have this enormous color palette, you could say, of instruments, it seems like a waste not to be using. There's a lot of blank space on my scores sometimes, and then when I started looking at other scores, I was doing like lots of score study for the things I really liked. I realized, oh, everything's like this. Everyone's like this. You have these dynamics between. There's a role, there's a purpose for every instrument, just like how it feels to play in a band. You're not playing all the time. You're not playing at maximum power at all times. You have your moments, and you have your purpose, and you have your color, your little specific instrumental color, and that may serve a very specific point in the piece. And so that, like, these composers are what I reference for, like, oh, that instrument in this combination makes me feel this way, and this. So there's Chopin, there's Strauss, there's especially the waltzes. Really like Debussy, and then, like, also you can say pretty much anything. Actually, I think that my two favorite other ones. So there's Tchaikovsky, who I didn't realize until relatively recently, like in the last few years or so, that I loved as much as I do. Because there's a bunch of pieces that you hear and you go, wait, that's Tchaikovsky? I had no idea. Or I'd forgotten or something. And the one that always gets me, and I joke about this, but it keeps happening, is I wake up with CBC, CBC music. I still call it Radio 2. I wake up with Radio 2 as my clock radio alarm. So every morning I wake up with CBC music playing. And I always play the sort of game of, because we did this in university, where you'd try to guess who the composer was based on, if it's a piece of music that you've never heard or that you've forgotten about, you would play the game of, like, can I pinpoint the decade and the country of origin, and then therefore make an educated guess about who the composer is. And there's one composer that I always can't guess, and it's always the same thing. I go, this is a really amazing piece of music. I love this. Why have I've never heard this piece of music before, but it's incredible, and it's everything I love in music, and it's always Saint-Saëns. every single time. And it's become an in joke with my family that you'll be like, I've never heard this piece of music before, but I absolutely love it. It must be Saint-Saëns. And then it is. It's and every time it happens, I forget to go and look up the piece, and I forget to go and do more research on it, and then it just keeps happening. So I think I would have to say that Saint-Saëns is probably an influence, because I love that music so much. I know so little about them. So not usually a focal point in in like Western concert music education. It's one of those like, oh yeah, and he also exists. It's yeah. So
So you got your first album, Watching the Sky. What's your second one, Watching the Ground? Actually, I want to ask, so what is the fountain you're drinking from for your next chapter of inspiration?
Ooh, good question. It's funny when I go, whenever I finish a project, the next thing I do usually tends to be like not like reactionary to it, but more of a, okay, I've done that, let's do something completely different. And I think that was true for my second to third album and third to fourth. Like the context or the motivation is usually completely different. So second to third was, all right, I've done this album, let's do this very sparse kind of nature inspired thing. And then after that, it was, okay, I've moved to Toronto, let's do this very like urban kind of inspired city based. I did the nature, now let's do the city based thing. And then it was, now let's do full orchestra. And I sort of toyed with the idea of moving towards very simple guitar arrangements, because I always lament that my repertoire is so to me it feels so varied in terms of instrumentation that sometimes it's challenging to if you're doing a show and someone says, hey, can you play this song, you'll go, well, I would like to, but unfortunately that thing needs 5 guitars and I'm one person. So like as I sit down to write, and this is why the orchestral thing worked so well, I think, is that I would do these really dense arrangements where I just keep overdubbing guitar tracks and stuff, and then you'd have nowhere to play, like no way to play them, because I'm one guy, and if you're lucky in Toronto, you can get like there's a few flamenco guitarists, but we're also busy doing our own things that it's hard to get 2 or 3 of you in the same place at the same time, and so there's just so many of my pieces that I can't play live. Unless I'm doing it with a full orchestra, where you just give those parts to other instruments. So my thought was, maybe I'll come back to something more like filling out my repertoire with more things that I can do, just me and a percussionist, or me and a percussionist and some other instrument that isn't guitar, like bass or cello or violin or something. And so that's been in the back of my head, but every time I sit down to write, I just keep thinking about orchestral music. One of the things I have on the go right now is I'm trying to, I was finishing the scoring for Watching the Sky, like just exporting all the PDFs right when Finale stopped being supported. So I just basically like put a lock on my computer, was like, you're not updating this until this project is done, because you'll lose access to everything. And like I'm not sure if you're familiar, or who will be familiar with this, but one of the main scoring software companies was like, yeah, we're not updating this piece of software anymore, and it will not work when you update your computer.
Oh.
So I basically haven't updated my computer in 2 years. And what I'm doing right now is transferring everything over to a new system. So every day I'm going through my scores that we've recorded and tweaking them and adjusting them, like moving them into a new piece of software, but staring them dead in the face every day, going, oh yeah, we changed this in the recording. Okay, I'm going to update that. Oh, I could probably make this better. I didn't like this as much as I could have, so let's change it. And so I'm just kind of living in that world right now, is of tweaking the old things and wanting to write new things in that style. So I guess the real answer is I don't know. I feel like I should be doing simpler, like sort of in contrast to the orchestral stuff, doing much more simple guitar things, smaller arrangements and more guitar focused. But what I'm having the most fun doing is playing around with orchestra stuff. So who knows? We'll have to see.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you being on the show. Really wonderful to talk with you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Really enjoyed this. What would the young 15-year-old Matt say to the current Matt?
If he knew what current Matt was doing,
Yeah.
oh, he'd probably he would. I don't think he was lying. Or, well, it's funny because it takes, what I'm doing is exactly what I, when I was 15, would have dreamed of doing, but never would have thought I would actually get to do. So I don't know. He'd be very, very happy. Yeah.
I bet. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. Really appreciate this. So we're going to end this stream, but just wait right there. Okay, everyone.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us. Everything will be linked down below. And I hope you will subscribe to this channel for more wonderful, wonderful artists. And thank you so much, Matt.
My pleasure.
Wait there, please.